My name's Josh, and I'm 42. My wife, Amanda, is 40, and we've been married for 18 years. We have 2 kids, Ethan, 17, and Lily, 14. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Nice house in the suburbs, steady jobs, family vacations every summer. But recently, things have started falling apart in ways I never expected. Amanda has always been fiery. She's the kind of woman who doesn't take crap from anyone, and for years, I admired that about her. But somewhere along the way, that fire started burning me, too. She became more critical, more dismissive, and more secretive. I brushed it off as stress, teenagers, bills, life. Ethan, our oldest, has always been closer to Amanda than me. I didn't mind at first. She had a way of connecting with him that I struggled to replicate, especially during his rebellious teenage years. But recently, even their closeness felt off. They started spending a lot of time alone together, long drives, late-night chats behind closed doors. I told myself I was being paranoid. The first real crack appeared a few months ago. Amanda started dressing differently, nothing drastic, but enough for me to notice. She'd wear makeup to run errands, or buy new clothes she claimed were for work. When I commented on it, she snapped, "Maybe I just want to look good for myself, Josh. Is that such a crime?" Ethan, too, started acting differently. He'd go out at odd hours, refusing to tell me where he was going. When I tried to talk to him about it, he rolled his eyes and muttered, "You wouldn't get it, Dad." I chalked it up to teenage angst, but looking back, I should have seen the signs. I didn't know what I was looking for at first, just that gnawing feeling in my gut telling me something wasn't right. Amanda's dismissive attitude, Ethan's weird behavior, and the growing tension in the house. It all felt like too much to ignore. Then one Friday evening, Amanda told me she was meeting a friend for dinner. She left the house dressed to the nines, wearing a dress I didn't even know she owned. Ethan, conveniently, said he was heading out with his friends. Something about their timing felt off. I decided to follow her. I know, not exactly husband of the year behavior, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I waited a few minutes after she left, then got in my car and trailed her. Amanda wasn't going to meet a friend. She drove across town to a small, out-of-the-way diner, one of those places where nobody asks questions. I parked far enough away to stay hidden and watched as she got out of the car. A few minutes later, Ethan pulled into the same parking lot. My stomach dropped. At first, I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe Amanda had asked Ethan to meet her for some reason. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. But then I saw them through the window. They weren't sitting like a mother and son catching up. Amanda was leaning in close, her hand resting on his arm. Ethan was laughing, looking at her like a man looks at a woman. My hands started shaking. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. When Amanda got home later that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. "How was dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Fine," she said, not even looking at me as she tossed her bag onto the counter. "Who were you with?" "Just a friend," she said quickly, too quickly. "Why? Which friend?" I pressed. She hesitated, then glared at me. "What's with the 3rd degree, Josh? Are you keeping tabs on me now?" "No," I said evenly. "But I saw you, Amanda. I saw you at that diner with Ethan." Her face went pale for a split second before she recovered. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "We were just talking about something important." "At a diner, dressed like that?" I said, my voice rising. "What the hell is going on, Amanda?" Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something cold and calculating behind her usual fire. "You're imagining things," she said sharply, "and I'm not going to sit here and listen to your paranoia." She stormed upstairs, leaving me alone at the table, my mind racing. After that night, the tension in our house became unbearable. Amanda avoided me at every turn, and Ethan started giving me the cold shoulder, too. Anytime I brought up what I'd seen at the diner, Amanda shut me down with the same line, "You're being ridiculous, Josh." I wasn't ridiculous, I was angry. One night, I decided to check Amanda's phone while she was in the shower. It wasn't something I'd ever done before, but I couldn't sit in the dark any longer. Her password hadn't changed, and within seconds, I was scrolling through her texts. At first, I didn't find anything unusual. Then I opened her messages with Ethan. Most of the texts were innocuous. Reminders about school events, short exchanges about dinner plans. But one message, buried further down the thread, made my stomach turn. Ethan, are you sure Dad doesn't know? Amanda, he's clueless, don't worry. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. What the hell didn't I know? I scrolled back further and found another message that made me feel like the floor was falling out from under me. Amanda, we can't keep meeting like this. He's getting suspicious. Ethan, we'll figure it out. I'll call you later. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was reading. What were they hiding? Why did it feel so wrong? That evening, I confronted Ethan while Amanda was out. We need to talk, I said, blocking his path as he tried to walk upstairs. He rolled his eyes. Not now, Dad. Yes, now, I said firmly. What's going on between you and your mom? His face hardened, and for a moment, I thought he was going to shove past me. But then he smirked. A cocky, defiant smirk that sent a chill down my spine. You wouldn't get it, he said. Try me, I said, my voice shaking. You're just mad because she doesn't listen to you anymore, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. Maybe if you treated her better, things wouldn't be this way. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I snapped. He shrugged and walked past me, leaving me standing there, my fists clenched. When Amanda came home later, I didn't waste any time. What the hell are you and Ethan hiding? I demanded the second she walked through the door. She sighed, dropping her bag on the counter. Josh, I'm not doing this with you again. Yes, you are, I said, stepping closer. I saw your texts. I know something's going on. So stop lying to me and tell me the truth. Her eyes flashed with anger. But there was something else there too, fear. You went through my phone? She said, her voice cold. Do you even hear how crazy you sound? Don't turn this around on me, I said. What are you hiding, Amanda? For a moment I thought she might actually come clean. But instead, she grabbed her keys and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And I was going to find out the truth no matter what. The next few days were unbearable. Amanda stayed out later than usual, and when she was home, she barely spoke to me. Ethan avoided me altogether, retreating to his room or leaving the house without a word. The air in our home felt thick with secrets. But I wasn't sitting idly by anymore. I started digging. I checked bank statements, receipts, anything that could give me a clue about what Amanda and Ethan were hiding. That's when I found it. A charge from a local hotel, a place neither of us had any reason to visit. It wasn't just one charge. It was recurring. My blood ran cold as I stared at the receipts. The dates matched nights when Amanda had claimed to be working late or out with friends. That evening, while Ethan was out and Amanda was upstairs, I drove to the hotel. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Confirmation, maybe, or someone who could tell me the truth. The receptionist looked up as I walked in. Hi, can I help you? Yes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to check on a reservation, Amanda Taylor. The receptionist hesitated, glancing at the computer. I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out guest information. It's important, I said, leaning closer. She's my wife. Her eyes softened slightly, and she typed something into the system. She's a regular guest, she said carefully. She's usually here for a couple of hours at a time. I'm sorry, but that's all I can say. Couple of hours. I thanked her and walked out, my chest tight. When I got home, Amanda was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Have a nice evening? She asked, not even looking up. Why don't you tell me about the hotel, Amanda? I said, standing in the doorway. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. What are you talking about? I found the charges, I said coldly. The same hotel over and over. You've been lying to me, Amanda, so tell me the truth. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then she did what she always did. She went on the attack. "You went through my bank statements?" she snapped, standing up. "Do you even hear how crazy you sound? I've told you 100 times. There's nothing going on." "Then explain the hotel," I said, my voice rising. "I was meeting a friend," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "Who?" Her hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. The door opened, and Ethan walked in, earbuds in, oblivious to the tension. When he saw us, he froze. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone cautious. "You tell me," I said, turning to him. "Why don't you tell your mom how much I know?" He looked at Amanda, then back at me, his face going pale. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." "You're both terrible liars," I said, shaking my head. "And I'm done playing this game. One of you is going to tell me what's really going on, or I'll find out myself." Amanda glared at me, her hands trembling. "You're being ridiculous, Josh. There's nothing to tell." I stared at them, my anger boiling over. "You've both destroyed this family," I said, my voice shaking. "I hope whatever this is was worth it." I grabbed my keys and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind racing. The lies, the hotel charges, the secretive behavior between Amanda and Ethan. It all pointed to something dark, something I couldn't fully wrap my head around yet. But I wasn't going to let it fester any longer. The next morning, I called in sick to work and decided to dig deeper. I reached out to Nick, a private investigator I knew through a mutual friend. I told him everything. The suspicious charges, the cryptic texts, and Amanda's growing hostility. "This is messy," Nick said after I finished. "But I'll take a look. If there's something going on, I'll find it." A few days later, Nick called me back. "Josh, you're going to want to sit down for this," he said, his tone serious. "What did you find?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "I followed Amanda yesterday," he said. "She went back to that hotel you mentioned. But here's the thing. Ethan showed up too." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "They went in together," Nick continued. "And they weren't acting like a typical mother and son. There was an intimacy there, Josh. Something that didn't feel right." The words hit me like a freight train. My vision blurred, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You're sure?" I whispered. "I'm sorry, man," Nick said. "But yeah, I'm sure." That evening, I confronted Amanda again. I waited until Ethan was out, determined to get the truth. "You lied to me," I said as soon as she walked through the door. She sighed heavily, tossing her bag on the counter. "Not this again, Josh. You went to the hotel with Ethan," I said, my voice shaking. Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing. "You've been spying on me? Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "I know what you're doing, Amanda. I know everything." Her expression hardened, but there was something else there. Panic. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Then explain it," I shouted. "Explain why you're sneaking off to a hotel with our son." Her face crumbled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually break down. But instead, she lashed out. "You don't understand, Josh," she yelled. "You've been so checked out of this family for years. You don't get it." "Don't get what?" I demanded. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan needed someone. He needed someone to be there for him, and I got caught up in trying to fix things." "Fix things?" I repeated, incredulous. "What the hell are you talking about?" She didn't answer, just grabbed her bag and ran out the door. When Ethan came home later, I was waiting for him. "Sit down," I said, my voice cold. He hesitated, then slouched into a chair, his expression defensive. "What's going on between you and your mom?" I asked bluntly. "Nothing," he muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. "Don't lie to me, Ethan," I said, my voice rising. "I know about the hotel. I know you've been sneaking around together. So tell me the truth." For a moment he looked like he might say something. But then he stood up, his face twisted with anger. You wouldn't understand, he spat. Try me, I said, standing up too. But he just stormed upstairs, slamming his door behind him. I sat in the silence, my mind racing. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I'd imagined, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the truth. The house was silent after Ethan's outburst, but my mind was anything but. I couldn't shake the feeling that something truly terrible was happening, and the more I thought about it, the darker my thoughts became. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. If Amanda and Ethan weren't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. The next morning I called Nick again. I need you to dig deeper, I said, my voice firm. I need to know everything. Texts, emails, whatever you can find. Nick hesitated. Josh, are you sure? This is already messy. The deeper we go, the harder it'll be to come back from this. I'm sure, I said. I can't live like this anymore. Later that night, Nick sent me a file. I opened it, my hands trembling as I read through the transcripts of text messages between Amanda and Ethan. Most of the messages were mundane discussions about school, errands, little jokes. But buried in the thread were conversations that made my stomach churn. Amanda, you can't tell him, Ethan. Not yet. Ethan, I'm tired of hiding, Mom. He's gonna figure it out eventually. Amanda, let me handle it. Trust me. The more I read, the more sick I felt. Whatever they were hiding, it was big, and it was deliberate. The next day, I waited for Amanda to get home from work. When she walked through the door, I was ready. We need to talk, I said, standing in the living room. She stopped in her tracks, her expression instantly guarded. What now, Josh? I held up my phone, showing her the messages. You've been lying to me, both of you. So why don't you finally tell me the truth? Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. You went through my texts? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't deflect, I said, my voice rising. What are you hiding, Amanda? What the hell is going on between you and Ethan? Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. You've been sneaking around together, lying to me, meeting at hotels? I said, my voice trembling. What is it, Amanda? What are you hiding? She took a shaky breath and finally said, Josh, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, I shouted. Her tears spilled over as she said, It's about his father. I froze. What? Ethan's not your son, Josh, she said quietly, her voice breaking. He's Jake's. The room spun around me as her words sank in. Jake. An old flame she'd told me about in passing. Someone I'd never thought twice about. You've got to be kidding me, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I didn't know when I got pregnant, she sobbed. Jake and I were seeing each other before we got serious. And by the time I realized, I didn't know how to tell you. So you just lied? I shouted. You let me raise him as my son for 17 years. And now you're sneaking around behind my back to tell him the truth? I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she cried. He needed to know. He was asking questions, and I couldn't keep lying to him. I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. Ethan wasn't just distant because he was a teenager. He'd been keeping this secret, too, and Amanda had let it fester until it exploded. I turned away, my chest heaving. I can't do this right now, I said, grabbing my keys. Josh, please, she said, reaching for me. Don't, I said coldly, walking out the door. I drove aimlessly that night, the weight of Amanda's confession pressing down on me like a boulder. Ethan's not my son. The words played over and over in my head, each repetition feeling like a fresh wound. 17 years. 17 years of being a father, raising a boy I thought was mine, and it was all based on a lie. I parked at a gas station, my hands gripping the steering wheel as anger, sadness, and disbelief swirled inside me. The next morning I called Nick. I need you to find Jake, I said, my voice flat. Nick paused. Are you sure about this, Josh? You're already dealing with a lot. Just do it, I said. I need to talk to him. By that afternoon, Nick had sent me Jake's address. He still lived in town, a fact that made my blood boil even more. Amanda had kept this secret for years while the man responsible lived just a few miles away. I drove to his house, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I knocked on the door, Jake opened it, his face instantly wary when he saw me. "Josh," he said, his tone cautious. "You know why I'm here," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He didn't argue, closing the door behind me. "I figured this day would come eventually," he said, his voice calm. I turned to face him, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You've known all this time, haven't you? You've known Ethan was yours, and you just let me raise him like a fool." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know for sure until recently. Amanda told me when Ethan started asking questions." "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" I snapped. "I thought it was her place to tell you," he said. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble." "Trouble?" I said bitterly. "You've already destroyed my life, Jake. And now you're sneaking around with my wife and son like you're some kind of savior." "I'm not sneaking around," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Ethan wanted answers. I was just trying to be there for him. While tearing my family apart?" I shot back. Jake stared at me, his expression hardening. "You want to blame someone, Josh? Blame Amanda. She's the one who lied to both of us." His words hit like a slap. As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. Amanda was the one who'd kept the secret, who'd let this fester until it exploded. I left without saying another word. When I got home, Amanda was sitting at the kitchen table, her face streaked with tears. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Ethan?" I asked coldly. "He's at a friend's house," she said quietly. "Good," I said, sitting across from her. "Because we need to talk." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Josh, I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said sharply. "You lied to me for 17 years, Amanda. You let me believe Ethan was my son. Do you even understand what you've done?" Her tears fell again, but I didn't feel sympathy this time. "I didn't want to lose you," she said. "I thought if I told you the truth, you'd leave." "And now?" I asked bitterly. "What do you think is going to happen now?" She looked up at me, her eyes full of desperation. "Please, Josh, don't do this. Don't throw everything away." "I didn't throw anything away," I said coldly. "You did." That night, I slept on the couch. The days following Amanda's confession were some of the darkest of my life. The house was suffocating, filled with tension and silence. Amanda tried to reach out, but every attempt felt hollow. Ethan avoided me entirely, and I couldn't even look at him without feeling the sting of betrayal. Not because of anything he'd done, but because of what Amanda had kept from both of us. I needed answers not just from Amanda or Jake, but from Ethan himself. One evening after dinner, I cornered Ethan in his room. He was sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone, earbuds in. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he stiffened. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. He sighed, pulling out his earbuds. "What now, Dad? Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why didn't you come to me instead of hiding this with your mom?" Ethan looked down, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know how," he muttered. "Didn't know how?" I said, sitting down on the edge of his bed. "I've been here for you your whole life, Ethan. I've been your dad. Did that mean nothing to you?" "It's not like that," he snapped, his voice shaking. "I didn't ask for this, okay? I didn't ask to be caught in the middle of your mess." "My mess," I repeated, stunned. "Your mother lied to me. Jake lied to me. And now you're shutting me out like I'm the bad guy." Ethan's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked like a little boy again, lost and confused. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "But when I started asking Mom questions, she told me Jake might be my real dad. I needed to know. And now you do," I said. "So what does that mean for us?" Ethan hesitated, then looked me in the eyes for the first time in days. "You're still my dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You always will be." The words hit me like a tidal wave, breaking through the anger and sadness. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The conversation with Ethan gave me the strength to face Amanda one more time. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat down with her in the living room. "We need to figure out what happens next," I said, my voice steady. Amanda nodded, her face pale. "I want to fix this, Josh," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." "I don't know if we can fix this," I admitted. "But if we're going to try, everything has to change. No more lies, no more secrets, and Jake is out of our lives for good." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I'll cut him off," she said. "I swear." "And Ethan?" I asked. "We'll tell him the truth together," she said. "We'll do whatever it takes to make this right for him." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Amanda and I sat Ethan down the next evening. The three of us sat around the dining table, the air heavy with unspoken words. Amanda was the first to speak. "Ethan, your dad and I need to talk to you," she began, her voice trembling. Ethan glanced between us, his jaw tight. "What now?" "We've both made mistakes," I said, stepping in. "But we want to make things right. For you, for all of us." Amanda took a deep breath, wiping her hands nervously on her jeans. "I've told your dad everything. About Jake, about the truth. He knows now, and we've decided that Jake won't be part of our lives anymore." Ethan's face darkened. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice shaking. "This isn't just about you two. It's about me. I didn't ask for this, and now you're acting like it's something you can just fix." "I'm still your dad," I said firmly. "I've been there for you your whole life, and I'm not going anywhere. But we have to move forward together, Ethan. As a family." He stared at me, his anger softening for a moment before he nodded reluctantly. I need time," he muttered. "We understand," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "But we'll get through this together. I promise." Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. Amanda kept her word and cut off contact with Jake. She deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and even changed her usual routines to avoid places he might show up. I didn't fully trust her yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Ethan and I began to repair our relationship, too. We went for drives, played basketball in the driveway, and slowly rebuilt the trust that had been fractured by Amanda's lies. But as much as things seemed to be improving, there was still a weight hanging over us. A question I couldn't ignore. Could I ever truly forgive Amanda? One evening, as we sat together after the kids had gone to bed, Amanda reached for my hand. "Josh," she said quietly, "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to ask, do you think we can get through this?" I looked at her, searching her face for some sign of the woman I'd married all those years ago. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to try, for Ethan, for Lily, for us, but it's going to take time. A lot of it." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Forgiving Amanda felt impossible some days, and even when I thought I was making progress, the memories of her betrayal would hit me like a punch to the gut. But I wasn't just doing this for her. I was doing it for Ethan and Lily. Whatever anger I felt toward Amanda, I couldn't let it destroy the family we'd built. Amanda threw herself into repairing our marriage. She went to therapy both on her own and with me. She apologized more times than I could count, and though it didn't erase what she'd done, it showed me that she was genuinely committed to fixing what she'd broken. Ethan, too, was making strides. He stopped shutting me out and began opening up about how he felt. "It wasn't fair," he said one night while we were shooting hoops in the driveway. "Mom put me in the middle of everything, and I didn't know how to handle it. But I know you're my dad, no matter what." Those words were everything I needed to hear. Jake, for his part, tried to reach out. He sent Ethan a few texts, but Ethan didn't respond. Amanda intercepted one of his messages and immediately showed it to me, which went a long way in rebuilding the trust between us. Eventually, Jake stopped trying and we moved on without him. About 6 months after the truth came out, Amanda and I sat down for one of the first truly honest conversations we'd had in years. "Do you still hate me?" she asked softly, her hands trembling as she held her coffee mug. "I don't hate you," I said after a long pause. "But I can't say I trust you completely yet either. That's going to take time." "I know," she said, tears in her eyes. "And I'll wait as long as it takes. I just want to prove to you that I'm still the person you fell in love with." I didn't respond right away, but I reached across the table and took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Reflecting on everything, I've learned that betrayal doesn't have to define a relationship, but it changes it forever. Amanda and I are still rebuilding, and some days are harder than others. If you're going through something like this, my advice is simple. Take it one day at a time. Don't make decisions out of anger, but don't ignore your feelings either. Trust can be rebuilt, but only if both people are willing to fight for it. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.